Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Insightful Accountant webinar, Streamlining and Automating Expense Management, presented by Zoho. Insightful Accountant is an online news and information source written for small business advisors interested in the latest news and offerings in accounting technology. My name is Emily Hedrick, and I'll be your webinar host. If you have any questions during the session, please enter them in the Q&A box, and we'll try to address them. Everyone that has registered will receive a follow-up email with the handout and recording later today. Today's speakers are Val Steed, Director Accountant, Tala Bakar, Program Manager, and Nathan Rogerson, Marketing Manager, all at Zoho. Thank you all for being here with us today. And when you're ready, you can get started.
Thank you, Emily. We really do appreciate you being here today. And very excited to share with you some concepts on expense management and also a little bit about our expense management tool. We're going to do a little bit of both concepts and application at the same time. My name is Val Steed. I'm one of the team. My title is Director of Accounts at Zoho. My background is actually through the accounting profession. In fact, for many years, I installed and implemented many automated accounting systems. So I understand that world pretty well. I will be sharing with you too kind of my history in another organization. We walked through a number of expense management tools and actually ended up on Zoho Expense. It's one of the reasons why I joined Zoho. I was quite impressed with the software and what they did. So I'll share that with you in places as we go along here. It was a very interesting journey, and we learned very quickly that trying to manage expenses using spreadsheets and other tools like that was just absolutely horrific. Let me introduce my team here today. Tala, you there?
Hey there, Val. I'm here. Thanks so much for the introduction. So my name is Tala, as Val mentioned. I work with both Val and Nathan on our Zoho Finance Partner Program. So I manage kind of the day-to-day operations in terms of partners who are interested in our program, who sign up, as well as existing partners. So if you or someone you know is an accountant or bookkeeper who's interested in partnering with Zoho, we ask that you visit zoho.com/CPA to learn more, and we'll be happy to answer other questions that you may have.
And Nathan.
Hey Val, hey everyone. And like Emily mentioned earlier, I'm the marketing manager over here at Zoho, and really my job is to help coordinate presentations like this, and also I help out with the partner team. So kind of like Tala, if y'all need anything, just go ahead and go over to zoho.com/CPA, and we'll be able to help you guys out.
So we're here to talk to you really about Zoho Expense, but we'd be remiss if we didn't kind of remind you also that Zoho has like 60 other applications, and you can pretty much run your entire business on Zoho Apps if you want to, for the most part. We currently are bragging over 60 million users. That's actually real. We have a lot of free users there too, but it's pretty significant user base. And we have applications for almost everything, as you can see here on the screen, and possible from hiring to web management, to mail campaigns, to subscription billing, to inventory. You know, the two key ones you ought to be aware of today, because it sounds like most of you probably working a lot with QuickBooks. The two key ones that we do have that integrate directly to QuickBooks are Expense, that we're talking about today, and also our inventory, which is also a really strong application. The Zoho Finance Suite is what our team in particular focuses on. And that's kind of the little bundle there of invoicing, inventory, books, expense, subscription billing. There's an electronic checkout system. So there's some different bundles and ways to price and get in. We're not here to sell that though. We're here to just make sure you understand who we are, what is Zoho, and then dive into this topic of expense management. We also need to kind of introduce to you the Zoho Finance Partners Program. So as mentioned, zoho.com/CPA. Now, please, if you're not a CPA, don't be offended by that. We kind of had to pick a site. And under that site, we welcome all accountants, bookkeepers, consultants, really anybody involved in the automation of accounting systems or consulting of them and implementation of accounting systems. And we have stuff for everybody. So don't let that run you off or be offended. We hope to grow that and get some other sites as well, specifically to just accounts or bookkeepers that would be useful as we go forward. So check out our site, come talk to us if you get a second. But now let's actually start talking a little bit about Zoho, or excuse me, actual expense management concepts here.
Yeah, so thanks, Val, for kind of doing that introduction for us. And really what Zoho Expense is it's an automated expense tool for administrators, managers, and employees. And it's really designed to make your job easier by making expense reports, trip requests, and reimbursements easy for you to just get from your employees and also for your business. And for the agenda today, what we're going to cover is administrative tasks and really what that means for your business and how you can increase efficiency through expense management, and also insightful analytics that expense management tools can provide for you. Now, where do businesses spend their resources? And whenever we're talking about administrative tasks, what are those tasks out there? Are they payroll, office space, marketing, supplies, or travel and expense management? And based off this chart, you can see that expense management took up around 1/3 of a company's resources. And really what that means is your business is potentially spending, 1/3 of the week on administrative tasks and, on an expense. And what's happening is as your business is spending time on expense management, they're not spending time on building revenue for your business, which is why everyone is in business, is to build revenue.
And Nathan, let me add one there too from my prior little business experience there. Let me explain. We had 4 partners and we had 10 instructors. We had 4 staff. So 4 partners, 4 staff, 10 instructors. Now our business was really running around teaching CPA in the accounting profession. So we were really heavy in travel, but even so, we found that when we were trying to manage expenses with spreadsheets and other tools, that it was absolutely a nightmare that most of our staff, the 4 people working for us, 3 out of the 4 were spending most of their time trying to approve expense reports, hunt down receipts, keep policy in place, let us know if there was something outside of the norm. It was really, really a huge, so what I'm trying to say is it kind of depends on your business, how much of that pie you're going to burn on expense management. But depending on that, you could be even more, a lot more, or less. But even with less, getting an automated solution can significantly help you.
Yeah, for sure. And that goes for a lot of business tools out there. And whenever we're talking about expense in particular, what are these administrative tasks and how can you shorten that time that you're spending when providing your expenses for your business? And some questions you need to ask yourself is, how do you enforce these expense policies? How do you issue reimbursements, manage travel and bookings, and how do you manage multi-level approvals? And really what these questions are, they're designed to kind of make you think, how much time are you spending doing those sort of tasks? And what Zoho Expense can offer is we can help automate expense policy enforcements, which will help save time because an expense report won't make it to the manager if it doesn't meet certain requirements. We can issue direct deposit reimbursements, which obviously saves time because you're paying your employee and there's no more back and forth. And also with managing travel requests, and you can set up an approval hierarchy, which can come into play and can be very important for larger businesses. Whenever we're talking about automatic policy enforcement and how it can save your business time is just by looking at Patricia's expense report. She submitted this expense and really what happened was it stopped her and said, there's a receipt required for an expense. And how this saved your business time is, for example, if Patricia didn't have this policy enforcement, she would have submitted an expense, it would have made it all the way to management, and managers would have to obviously go through the expenses and make sure everything's okay because that's their job. And they would see, hey, Patricia didn't send a receipt for this, and that's a requirement in order to be reimbursed. And what this really does is this starts a back and forth between the manager and Patricia, and eventually it's just wasting the manager's time because this is Patricia's job to provide this, and now the manager has to double check all of Patricia's work to make sure, did she do this for all of her expenses rather than just this one. And also how expense can save time is through ACH reimbursements. And this really is just a tool to, pay your employees quickly. And as they submit their expenses and as they get approved by the managers, you can just issue an ACH reimbursement and send that to them directly. Another really great function of Zoho Expense is approval based on hierarchy. And this can really help out a business who is larger, where there's, they have multiple employees and multiple managers. And as you can see in this example, any report that is less than $5,000 that an employee submits, it goes to the basic report hierarchy, and it goes from the employee to the team manager to the finance manager. Now, what happens if this report is over $5,000? And this is what obviously every business needs to set their own hierarchy and what's important to them, because obviously $5,000 could be a little bit more than you would be willing to let slide. And you would want to actually have your other project managers to look over these reports, because really the project manager knows a little bit more about what the employee and the team managers are working on, because they're in the weeds with the team manager and they know what those projects, what's required of the employee to take care of these projects. The finance manager is really there just to analyze and see what's happening in the business. The project manager is the one who actually can see, hey, employee number one spent over $5,000 on something. Why did they spend that much? And really, this is a tool that can help out larger businesses who are struggling with keeping track of what their employees are spending. And it allows a business to break up the workload from going directly to the finance manager to where they have to keep backtracking to the employee, to going directly to the project manager to where they know what the employee should be spending their money on, and they can coordinate that with the finance manager. Now that we've kind of gone over administrative tasks, let's talk about how expense management can increase efficiency. Tal, are you there?
I am. Thanks so much, Nathan. So when we talk about increasing efficiency, we're really focusing on the employee's perspective of this. So what are some of the things an expense tool should be able to do, or what do employees nowadays expect? One is they should be able to capture expenses easily. This, of course, means being able to use your mobile phone to take a picture of that receipt. But what happens once you take a picture? Do you have to manually enter that information, or should there be some more features that help those employees there? In addition to capturing those receipts, they also need to itemize those expenses. Is that a manual process? They might need to split expenses. So a single receipt may actually have multiple categories of expenses that need to be logged. How does an employee do that? And then finally, most expense tools are expected to have some type of mileage tracking feature. These are all features that make the lives of employees significantly easier. Now, when we're taking a look at Zoho Expense, you do get all of those features, and you also get additional ones that allow you to auto frame receipts. So what that means is it makes it a little bit easier to take a picture where you don't have to crop out all the other kind of background. That also saves on the file sizes if those need to be downloaded. Advanced Autoscan is a feature inside of Zoho Expense that's actually going to allow you to itemize receipts. So we'll talk a little bit more about how that works. And when you have integrations with third-party programs that you're using, for example, if you're using Amazon Business, you're going to have purchases for maybe that particular team or that role. And those purchases need to come into the expense management software. So actually integrating directly with your Amazon account makes that process a whole lot easier. And then one of the features that I use a lot in Zoho Expense myself is the Uber and Lyft integration. So anytime I travel for Zoho, with, of course, the advent of Uber and Lyft, you don't have to rent a car anymore whenever you go on business trips. So having all those multiple rides directly integrated into my expense management software allows me to have those receipts simply come in. It has a snapshot of the trip that I took, the distance that it was. If there's any tolls that were charged inside of Uber and Lyft, those show up too. So it makes that process a whole lot easier. Now, when we are actually talking about employees utilizing the software, what does this look like? So for example, in Zoho Expense, you can simply take a picture of your receipt as is expected, or you can also do the Autoscan feature that that crops it out for you, and have this information uploaded into your system. So that's one of the key features of Zoho Expense that is so important for employees.
Tyler, let me throw just a comment there. Folks, we went from, like I said, Excel expense report systems we started with Concur. Concur was really, really good, but it didn't do so well with receipts, in particular receipt scanning back in the day when we were using this a few years back. So my partner, one of my partners in my business said, no, we're going to move. And actually, we actually thought we would move to Tally at the time. So we moved to Tally for about 3 months, and that was disastrous. That didn't work for us and what we were trying to do. We looked at Expensify in detail, and that wasn't quite there. And then he found Zoho Expense. And this was one of the key things on this Autoscan, where it'll parse out the data and for the most part, capture everything off the receipt. So you're not inputting it later manually like we had to with Concur. Concur would grab a picture of the receipt, but then we were manually inputting stuff into the fields. Now, truth is, to be fair, I'm sure they've improved their product since the last time that I've seen it. But this is absolutely a big deal in saving time. And the biggest thing we found was it encouraged people to use the system where they were fighting with us before.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Val, for that example. So that's absolutely true. And one of the things that even within Zoho, we use all of our own applications. As we travel, we'll notice ways to make the expense management workflow easier. We relay that information back to the team, and then that gets translated into the software. So a lot of those feedback that you've given us in the past and others makes its way into the programs, makes that workflow significantly easier. So one of those improvements is the advanced Autoscan feature. So initially, when you took a picture of a receipt, it would parse the name of the merchant. So if you had a vendor that matched up to it, it would automatically associate it with them. It would get the total amount on the receipt, the date, and then it would figure out the currency. Now, this left line items as a huge kind of black hole where if you needed to have multiple line items and details, you had to go in and manually do that. Now, with advanced Autoscan, you are actually able to upload a picture of a receipt, whether it's from your phone or using the browser-based version of Zoho Expense, and it'll actually pull out individual line items and those amounts. Now, this is really important for submitting expense reports with a lot of detail, makes this process significantly easier, and you can accept these receipts in a variety of ways. So either you can take a picture, you can forward them to your email inside your Zoho Expense account. You can use the desktop version, as I mentioned. So this really helps. Now, if you are someone, for example, in Canada, we have a Canadian edition that actually allows you to separate out the taxes as well, because in Canada, it's a lot more important to calculate the separate tax amounts. So these are all functions that are built into Zoho Expense, ones that you can actually go in and take a look at pretty easily. Now, when we talk about itemizing expenses, this allows you to actually choose those different categories. So when we're talking about categories in expense management, these are, of course, a little bit different than the categories that you have in your accounting system, but it helps to have these match up with those so that when you run reports later on, you can easily figure out how much is spent on a group of transactions. So those categories can be meals and entertainment, they can be office supplies, on and on as they are specific. But having the itemization ability allows you to have a single receipt. Maybe I went to Home Depot to purchase a couple things for the office, but they don't all fall under one category. This is a way for you to kind of separate that out. Now, splitting, we're going to launch our first poll question. Let's go ahead and give that a few moments.
Yeah, I know, kind of going back to what Val was saying about it was sometimes employees have a hard time entering in expenses. I was actually a victim of that. Well, I guess not the victim. I was the one who would have a hard time entering in expenses. But once I started working at Zoho with how easy it is to submit an expense and just copy your receipt. And then once you do that, you can really do whatever you want with that receipt. And I just thought it was funny that he mentioned that.
No, absolutely. I know what you mean. All right, and we'll give this poll, and now we've completed that. So continuing on in the kind of workflow for expense management. So one of the important parts about expense management is being able to actually split an expense. So one of the issues that I had for, pretty much for the entire time that I had been traveling for Zoho was my manager would want to know what the per night rate was for the hotel that I stayed at. And this is really difficult because if you have an entire kind of all-in-one receipt, it just simply shows the full amount for the 3 or 4 days. Now, actually being able to split expenses allows you to take that total amount and subdivide it into multiple individual expenses for each night. Those expenses are listed on the receipt, and so when you have those kind of individual rates there, you can do that. So this is kind of another option in terms of the customization in the expense management lifecycle. So we know businesses have a variety of different ways that employees are expected to log their expenses. They may be using a business credit card, they may be using their personal cards, and there may be policies that are specific to certain employees and not to others and teams. And so the idea of Zoho Expense is to have all those features that you can choose to utilize which ones are most appropriate for your business. And so one of the most useful functions within any kind of expense management software, and specifically within this one, is being able to log mileage. So there's a few different ways that you can actually do this. So one is you can actually, of course, manually enter the distance. That's a given. You can also use GPS. So what that allows you to do is just simply hit start or stop once you reach your destination, and then whatever distance your phone has traveled can be logged along with the route that you took, which will be overlaid on a map. You can also use the actual addresses. So you can put in your starting and ending address and calculate the different routes and enter those as well. And then, of course, you can use the odometer reading from your car. So there are a number of different ways you can log mileage. One of the most useful ways, of course, is using your phone as shown here, but you can also use other tools like your Apple Watch, for example. Is a great way to log mileage as well. Just really helps you to get your employees to log those expenses wherever they are. So it's not something that they have to do, once a week or once they get back to the office. It's whenever you incur that expense.
Yeah, I have a funny story about this, Tala. Is my wife, she's actually in sales, and she used to enter in her travel expenses manually in Excel. And this was a year ago. And I introduced an application to her, not necessarily Zoho Expense, but it was an application to where she could track it. She pressed start as soon as she gets in the car, and then end whenever she gets to her destination. And it saved her a ton of time whenever she was actually entering in her miles at the end of the month. It was just pretty funny that I caught that and I saw her doing that. So
yeah, and it's funny. I've even taken Uber trips, and if I'm out for a business trip and they'll ask me kind of what I'm doing, and I'll tell them a little bit about Zoho, and then I'll ask them sometimes just to get like an informal poll. And I've done this with probably at this point maybe 50 Uber drivers, and say, how do you log your mileage? Are you logging your mileage? Are you logging your expenses to deduct from your taxes?
mm-hmm.
And so some of them are actually doing that. Some of them have like a notebook and that they keep in the passenger seat, and they're writing down the start and stop odometer. And I told them, I said, Zoho Expense actually has a totally free version for up to 3 users, and of course they're independent contractors, so that was something that they can utilize. So there's a lot of different roles that this is actually really important for.
Mm-hmm.
So here we wanted to just show a really quick example of how this receipt scanning actually looks in real time. And this is a quick video that Val made for us.
Yeah, I'm going to go.
And I'll go ahead and let that play. And I'll ask you to skip ahead in a moment as well.
Okay.
Zoho Expense and scanning receipts. If I go into Zoho Expense and I use the camera scanner, one thing that you may or may not know, there is an auto scan. When it picks up the edges, it will automatically scan that receipt. And then, of course, for quite a while now, a number of years, we've had the auto scan capability to go down through and pick off everything in the receipt. And for the most part, it gets it all pretty correct, with the exception of account, which account you're trying to code that to. Often it'll default kind of to your last account that you used or something similar to that. Now, if we give it just, I believe here, a few seconds on
And
this,
Nathan, if you could skip
I
ahead for
believe
just
we
a
will
quick
get an
moment
answer.
so we can show kind of the details.
I can go in and take a look at that,
There we
see
go.
which date it was captured.
And so here you can actually see this
Which
was
is
automatically populated
correct.
information
Got it.
from the receipt.
Yes,
so
and folks, just to clarify one thing there, that was me, and I actually called auto frame auto scan. Sorry. So the first part was auto frame when it saw the edges of the receipt, tightened in on it, which that's one of our really, really new features. It's terrific. We used to have to kind of frame it a little bit if we want it cleaned up, but the auto scan, the picking off of where you paid, the date, the currency, all that stuff has been in there a long time. That was what my partner really was thrilled about, moved our business to that. And they're still there. They love this product. The one complaint we had when we first went to Zoho Expense, they've solved now with the splitting of the expenses right on the receipt that Tala just showed you. That's a big deal. That's a really big deal. So we've solved that. A number of other things we've solved. It's a very effective way to capture. And I believe, Tala, you were the one that told me, whenever you get a receipt, always sit down, take a picture of it, at least get the picture of it now, because then you can like auto scan it, deal with it later. And that concept has worked really well for me. No matter what, just hurry, get it, and then move on, throw that receipt away.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's been really useful. And the Autoscan runs in the background, and it's not on your actual system. So it doesn't, take any resources there. It simply is scanning in Zoho's cloud. And you're right, when you come back later, at the end of the week to do your expense report, all the information is already there. And it's just a really great way to have those details stored. And I believe, and Val, maybe you can clarify on this. I remember I got this question in, I think one of the live events we did was, do you need to have paper copies of those receipts still? And my understanding was that as long as you had clear, legible scans of those receipts, that if you were, God forbid, to get audited, you would be able to actually utilize those.
That is correct. Yes. The thing is, they've got to be very, very clear so that an IRS auditor could look at that and see if he has any issue. But if they're clear receipts, you're fine. Also realize too, I believe the last number I heard on IRS minimum limitation, essentially, they don't care under a certain amount. And that amount is at least $50 per transaction. So they're not going to really spend a lot of time digging in on an IRS audit on anything that's under $50 per item kind of thing. Unless, of course, they're going to use sampling auditing and statistics on you. If you have 500 items at $49, they're going to look at it.
Right.
But you get the idea that in general, they're not going to waste their time for something under $50. At my prior business, my partner, who's a much better tax practitioner than I, actually set our limit in our business at $75. So anything $75 and less, we're not even worried about receipts on. And for the most part, we had really, really good people that we could trust with this, and it was not a problem. Now, I've talked to other businesses that said, well, it's not really working for us. We set a limit. We'll use 25 as an example. So like $25. And even at 25, sadly, we've seen a lot of people submitting $24.50 receipts, and a bunch of them. And too often they'll put in those ones underneath, and it bothers us. And look, folks, if you're caught in that, that is not a policy problem. It's not a technology problem. It's a people problem. And I feel for you. We've had to deal with that on my prior business. I've had to deal with that when I was in public practice. Not cool, okay? But that can be an indication you might have a people problem if they're hovering right underneath the receipt maximum or minimum, and you got a bunch of them. So heads up.
And one of the things that coming to a product like, whether it's Zoho Expense or another expense management tool, is that, for example, when I first started at Zoho, we hadn't launched Zoho Expense yet. This is about 5 years back. And we were still submitting, a stack of receipts with, actually American Express actually has an expense management tool that you can kind of print out and and go through that. So that's what we would do. And then you can kind of justify, okay, if you don't have every $25 and under receipt because a month ago you stopped at Starbucks on a business trip, and that's understandable. But when you simply have your phone with you and you can take a picture of the receipt, then that excuse no longer really applies. And so actually, I don't know if you noticed this, Val, but about a year back, even inside of Zoho, I'm sure you submit all your receipts, they lowered that threshold. It went down.
They did.
Went down to like $20 now, because the idea is that if you just get in the habit, you take a picture of that receipt, there really shouldn't be any difficulty in having it available. And
yeah, that's
that
not
kind
an
of
IRS compliance issue. That was an internal
right
management issue. Right.
Right. And it was one of those things where it kind of encourages employees to behave in a certain way. And the policies that you set up inside of your expense management software can do exactly that, right? You can have certain policies that, for example, you may issue a per diem for your employees that travel. That's something we didn't have for a while. It was kind of an understanding. And when you're kind of a smaller organization, you're more dynamic, those types of things are okay. But as you grow, and we had, instead of having 10 people traveling at a time, we had, 400 people traveling at a time. It started to become a little bit more important to say, hey, you only have $100 a day or $70 a day for food and meals. And let's actually just build that into your product. If you have any questions, you're not sure about it, go into your Zoho Expense app on your phone. You can see the policies listed there that your administrator has put in for you. So so that was a little bit of we went off on a tangent, but I think it was definitely helpful.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All these policies, folks, and procedures have an effect. In my prior business for many years, we had really good people. We could really trust them. So we absolutely ran without any, even with all these guys traveling, without any per day DM. In other words, they could spend whatever they wanted to spend. If they wanted to go into a really nice steakhouse and have a $400 dinner, they could. They could also go into Subway and get a $8 sandwich. At the end of the year, everybody's expenses were averaged, and there was a bit of a competition to see who could keep their expenses under what. We only had a couple of occasions in almost 25 years of this where we got a few things a little bit out of whack. Well, that worked well for that business. A bigger business probably without question is going to have to run with some kind of per diem. And you can look at some of the government rule. If you need help on this, some of the government per diems that they set are pretty well done. You go see what they have per city and whatever, and it's very helpful. So consider all this. Policy really helps set your business, and all we're talking about today is a tool that can help you manage that policy.
Absolutely. And we'll take a look at that once. Hopefully we have time towards the end. We can jump in to the product and kind of take a look. So I mentioned earlier the Amazon Business Integration. This is, inside Zoho Expense under the integrations page, this is kind of what that looks like. Essentially, what you're going to do is have all of those transactions from your Amazon account coming in. And so you can then exclude transactions that don't apply. So, don't be nervous where, you might purchase other things for your inside of your Amazon account. And if you're not familiar what Amazon Business is, because I actually didn't realize this. So inside of your existing Amazon Prime subscription, you can create an Amazon Business account that simply separates out your transactions and just allows you for invoicing purposes and receipt management purposes to have a separate kind of order details page. So this is bringing in only those transactions. But if you still need to exclude any transactions, you can do that. You can also assign the transactions to a particular user. And then that user can then apply those transactions in their expense report. So there are a number of really useful association functions listed here as well.
And also a note on, I know this, we're not an Amazon, we don't work for Amazon, but Amazon Business, if you have an Amazon account, Amazon Business, I believe, is free, and they offer some cool perks. So yeah, I would definitely advise you to take a look at it.
Now, the integration with Uber and Lyft is actually available inside of your Uber and Lyft account. So you can go into the business profile that you have, and then under integrations, you'll see under accounting software or finance software, you'll see Zoho Expense listed there. So as I mentioned, one of the most difficult parts about these receipts originally was that they are digital. And so before we had this integration, I would try to screenshot them and then upload them into my expense software. That was a little bit annoying because, everything doesn't really fit on the screenshot. Sometimes you have to scroll a little bit. It was kind of a weird situation. So once we actually were able to build these integrations out, those receipts get uploaded into Zoho Expense right away. And then whenever I'm associating my expenses to a report, I can then simply pull those. Now, what I mean by report, and we didn't really cover this, and I'll talk about this in the product, is you don't actually submit individual expenses. You submit the expense report that has expenses associated with it. So sometimes folks will distribute their expense reports based on certain projects they work on. I, for example, just do it based on the time that I incurred those expenses. So if it's for a month period, I'll simply put all those individual expenses listed there, submit the report. That's what the managers receive, right? And what Nathan talked about earlier was in that hierarchy, they're kind of passing along the report. And so they can question individual transactions inside of it. But if they were to approve it or reject it, they approve or reject kind of the entire report. So I think sometimes people get a little bit confused by that, but the report really is the vehicle that moves expenses across. Now, one of the most interesting features that came out in the past year was report automation. So report automation basically means that I'm actually going to automatically submit this report based on certain criteria that I might have. So this is really simple to set up. And of course, it does take a little bit of diligence to ensure that everything's going to be ready prior to that submission date. But it helps to kind of foment good behavior inside of your organization. So for example, if you need everyone to submit an expense report by the end of the first week of the next month, for example, maybe the 7th of each month, then one thing you can actually do is, since they're taking a picture of all the receipts, those expenses are being uploaded automatically. Now they're actually being, all the information is being parsed from them. They're even being itemized. As long as employees are going in, you can set up an alert that says, hey, your report's going to be submitted automatically on Friday. So they need to just go in and double check the information. It's actually going to take all of those expenses that were logged during that period, put them into a report for you, and then submit them to the manager. This is a really fantastic way to try to get those expense reports in on time. Of course, this does take some training and making sure that employees are double checking that information at least once before that report is submitted. But it really does encourage those reports to go in. So this can be activated under the settings and the report automation feature listed there. Now, one of the features inside of Zoho Expense is the ability to actually delegate access to a different user. So for example, a CEO might need to submit expenses, but they are traveling or they are unable to actually review other expense reports that are being submitted to them, or submit their own expense reports. So maybe they're on vacation for a week. And instead of having a bottleneck where those don't go through, they can actually delegate that authority to someone else inside the organization. So that can be an assistant that they have. The assistant would then have access to those same reports and the ability to actually generate those reports on their behalf and submit and approve them. So this is designed to be something that could be done temporarily, or even if there's a longer term kind of relationship where they need to actually manage those. This is a really useful way to do that. I found that this is useful in other scenarios too. So there might be a scenario where you are actually on a team and there are multiple kind of team expenses, so a team manager. And again, if someone's unavailable, to make sure that those employee expense reports get approved because reimbursements are associated with them, that's a really important thing. And you don't want to necessarily have to share your login details, of course, because that's not safe. What you can do is simply delegate authority to someone else. Now, it looks like there is a poll question that's coming up.
Yeah, while we're doing the poll question or just whatnot, Tala, I wanted to jump in and talk a little bit about the approval process, because as a manager on our prior systems that we used, it was kind of frustrating. We really didn't have a clean and easy way to approve and request or reject and ask for more detail, or it became extremely frustrating. And with Zoho Expense, one of the things that we were absolutely pleasantly surprised, because we didn't move to it for the approval process, we moved to it for the Autoscan, the detail of the receipts capability, and just the fact it was cleaner and easier to capture. But on the approval side, we were stunned at how it was easy to set up the line of flow. And even as we showed in that prior slide, let's say if something is greater than $5,000, you got to go over to a partner and get that approval instead of going straight to Casey, which is what we did with most of our expenses. She was like the mother of the company. And it worked just absolutely beautifully. And being on the other side of that now here at Zoho, I can tell you that it's real easy to get your notification and email. You go in, you look at the expense. You go to your expense tool, it shows you people underneath you that are working with you that are sending you these expense reports, and you can approve or deny or right there. It's very easy, click on, go, or you can even ask for more information. You can send it back, tell them, do this, work on this. You can see the receipts they've attached. You can see, and it depends on your policy in your company. If you allow them to go ahead and submit an expense report in excess of $25, but your policy is everything over $25 has to have a receipt, what you could do is allow it to go forward with a warning, or you could actually allow it and set it up to say, no, we're going to block it no matter what if they don't have a receipt. So there's different ways you can set it up. But I can tell you, being on the other side of this in the approval process, as well as I submit my own up to the people that I report to here at Zoho, it's so clean and it's so easy to set up that process and maintain that process. I would love to actually see it from the endpoint side. I would love to see what it looks like when the final person approves and like pushes it back through the bank clearing system and pays people. I'd love to see that side. I haven't seen that side yet, but everything else is very easy and clean.
Awesome. Thanks for that. And thanks, Paul, for kind of going over the increased efficiency. So right now, we're going to go over insightful analytics and how analytics can help out your business through expense. And so really, as a business, you need to ask yourself certain questions and to see how you're managing your expenses. So some of these questions could be, which employee has the highest expenses? How much was their expenses last quarter? What is your highest expense category? What did you spend last year in expense reimbursement? And are your expenses policies being followed? And honestly, you need to ask yourself honestly if you can answer any of these questions, because obviously you could probably answer them within an hour if you wanted, but sometimes if you don't have an expense management tool, you can't necessarily just pull up what employee has the highest expenses or what was their expenses last quarter. And with really any expense management tool, you'll be able to find these answers. And specifically with Zoho Expense, you'll be able to find these really quickly and efficiently, so you can really keep track of what your business is spending. And so kind of just an example is expense category analytics. And as you can see, based off this chart, you're able to see really what you're spending with expenses. And for example, meals is the majority of this chart, and you can see that you're spending cab. But what is this other for 8.28%? And as a manager, you might want to dive a little bit more into that, because obviously $15,000 is nothing to scoff at. And you can kind of dive in a little deeper and see, hey, Tallah's spending $15,000 a year on Starbucks. What's going on? And not necessarily that that's bad. Maybe he's going out of the office that many times, but $15,000 for Starbucks would be a lot.
I thought that was the annual proper budget for Starbucks is 15 grand.
Yeah, you might want to talk to my wife about that one. But yeah, so, and also it just helps you keep kind of track of the categories, and you're able to kind of analyze, hey, this is how much my business is spending yearly on something. And we need to either cut costs, and how can we cut costs, or if you need to adjust your expenses in any other way. And also some analytics could be some policy violations. And as you can see here, we can see that the receipts are missing. And Patricia, again, she's not submitting her receipts, not to go after Patricia. I don't even, but she, obviously it's just notifying the manager that, hey, there's a violation within your business's policies, and she needs to start submitting the receipts so that she can be reimbursed. Because whenever you spend money, definitely your own hard-earned cash on business activities, you would like to be reimbursed. And we also have more analytics, obviously. Here's another chart for trip stages. And it kind of, this is a more in-depth tool within Expense. And really, it just allows your business to kind of keep track of what's going on within a trip whenever an employee submits a trip request. And it'll keep track of what stage they're at in the trip. So you can kind of know as a business how much you're expecting to spend. And for example, 76% of this chart is upcoming trips. So your business knows that, hey, we have some bills coming up for upcoming trips coming.
You know, Nathan, we didn't talk about that much, but folks, our expense tool also allows you to pre-approve trips, set up trips in here to be pre-approved by managers, and then it tracks that. That's like an approved trip, and then it tracks your expenses against the approved trip and what was approved, kind of like a budget, if you will. And that's a whole important side of it that we actually use internally at Zoho, and it's used quite often for especially international travel. It's used, and you know, I'm one that's not that big on like having to pre-approve people's travel. I pretty much, folks that I work with, I just trust them to do whatever they need to do on travel. But there's a lot of businesses where that becomes a very important issue of having pre-approved travel expenses and then managing against what was approved by the manager.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely once businesses start getting larger, you need to kind of look into pre-approving travel and pre-approving a lot of things and having certain policies in place. So right now we're going to do a quick demo, and let's see if we can do this.
So we just need to get Tala's screen active.
I
got
can
it,
share
Tala?
my screen. Yes, so I'm going to go ahead and share my Zoho Expense dashboard. Can you see my Zoho Expense screen?
Yes, we
Yep.
can, Tala.
Okay, fantastic. So I just wanted to give you a quick walkthrough before we kind of close out the session. So when you're first brought into Zoho Expense, you're brought to the main dashboard for both from a submitter point of view or an approver point of view. That's kind of the lingo that we use inside Zoho Expense, so submitter and approver. So you'll notice that kind of in the middle of the page, it shows some reports that are pending approval, because that's a role that this particular user is. And actually, this is Patricia's account. So you keep railing on Patricia, but she's actually an approver herself and a manager. Now, one of the other functions is actually viewing Patricia's own reports. So here you'll notice there is a report summary. So here's a total expenses that are unsubmitted. Here's the ones that are submitted and how much she's awaiting in reimbursement from the organization. Now, let's actually take a quick look at the receipt inbox. So the receipt inbox is where you can actually upload these receipts. So these can be ones that you take a picture of, as we mentioned earlier, as well as ones that you are simply uploading into Zoho Expense. So one of the tools that I've used is there's a Zoho Expense Chrome extension. So you can simply kind of select a part of your screen, upload that screenshot as a receipt. For example, I used to do that a lot for flights that I was booking because those typically are simply in an email. Or you can also just upload a PDF of a receipt that you might have as well.
Go back to the dashboard for just a sec, Tala. Let me
Sure.
show them one thing. Go click on view report there for just a second. So this is what a manager sees. They can go through and say, wait a minute, there's an expense violation. They can approve it, reject it, or ask, for more information. They can also click on the little receipt icon and see if there's a receipt attached. Down there under receipt, you can see it immediately shows you the actual receipt that's attached there. So that's showing you what it looks like to be an approver and approve stuff. And look at the history too. Go down below and see the history of where this report's been and done, whatever's gone back and forth. Just it's a clean system. To me, it's just really clean and easy and not overly complex.
And one of the important things about the history is that as a submitter, you know exactly what stage your expense report is at. I know sometimes in the past, I would simply submit an expense report when it was by paper. And then I know there's multiple levels. My manager has it, then his manager has it. And then our accounts payable person would reimburse me with a check, or it would come in my paycheck. But sometimes I would be left wondering who really has it. Is someone not available? And so having the history actually allows you to see, okay, the report has now been forwarded to Patricia. There was a comment from Charles on this. It was originally submitted to Charles. So you can see all of these different changes along the way. And this is not only important for, again, those approvers to know exactly what's happening, but also those submitters. So this is kind of the general area of reports that we were talking about. When you add an expense, this is simply the expense creation screen. Now, I had a question earlier asked if you can associate an expense with a project as well as with a class. So Zoho Expense uses something called reporting tags. That's what our Zoho Books product uses as well. Now, Zoho Expense does integrate with QuickBooks, so you are able to actually associate those classes with tags. But if you have projects that are created, you can simply associate this project, this expense with a project. And then if there are any classes, as we call them tags, you can associate those tags as well. So these are all custom tags that we have listed here. Now you notice the option to itemize this expense where you can add multiple line items. This is of course the manual view. If you were auto scanning this, which you have unlimited auto scanning inside Zoho Expense, you wouldn't necessarily have to do any of this. Now I actually want to jump down into the administrator view, because I feel like many folks here on this webinar are probably administrators in their organization. So when you're setting policies, one of the most important things about setting policies is being specific about who these policies apply to. So when you can actually, of course, choose who the administrators are for this particular policy. And if there's a policy document that you want to upload, you can actually list that here for employees to take a look at. So you can put in that information. There's some general rules here. So policy, and we can, associate any of those information. So I need a receipt for anything under, anything over $25. So anything under is okay. So we'll save and continue. And then these are all of the categories that I want to apply to this policy. So maybe I don't need any of these, so I know I'm going to uncheck them. And this is simply a policy for meals and travel meals. So this is something that I can choose specifically. So what this would mean is that if someone selects the category travel meals, this policy would apply only to that particular set of expenses. So once I've selected that, I'll then want to choose if there's any kind of mileage related information. This one is not mileage related, so I can continue. Skip this one. And then if there's a per diem that needs to default, or if there's a other category that this is going to go to. So I can also import these per diem rates that I might have for all these different types of allowances. You can do this based on different times of year, different months even, or even different regions. So of course, if I have a policy that applies to my employees in the US, that's going to be different than if I have someone who's traveling to Europe. So this is something that I can then associate with them and then complete this policy. Once that policy is created, so this test policy November, when I have users who are, these are submitters or approvers, I can choose the policy that applies to them. So I can actually choose this policy that's listed, and they'll then be applied to that particular policy. So that's a little bit of the view for policy creation. One of the other important parts that Nathan was going over was the analytics. So actually taking a look at expense details for a particular department. So I can set up departments here in Zoho Expense, and I want to customize this report for, let's say, last year. Run this report, see, okay, we had marketing expenses. What are these marketing expenses? I can simply click down. It's going to show me all the individual expenses along with the receipts listed here as well. So if I need to go back and view that particular expense, I can actually click on it and see exactly where it is. Now, there are a number of analytics that the submitters can also view that's related to them. So as Val mentioned, maybe you have a soft policy that says, hey, anyone who has less than $10,000 a year in travel or meals and entertainment for the travel, if it's someone who travels a lot, then you'll get some kind of reward. Maybe that's an extra bonus, or maybe you get a iPad or something. And so if they just want to see, hey, where am I for the year? Instead of having to try to calculate this manually, they can go into analytics, run a report details report for that period of time, and actually take a look at that too. And then lastly, before we close out, one of the most important parts of Zoho Expense that I think is actually associating your credit card directly into here. So these credit card integrations are both corporate and personal cards. So there are direct feeds that we have for any kind of Amex, MasterCard, or Visa. And then if you have personal cards like your Wells Fargo card, your Chase card, you can actually bring those here as well. If you have those personal cards, you can simply exclude the transactions that don't apply, and then just associate the transactions that do. So the way that I do most of my expenses at Zoho, since I have a company card, is I'll go directly into the cards view, select the card that I'm actually working on, and I'll go off of all of the statement transactions and then match these to a expense that's associated to it. So when you click on a transaction, it actually tries to look for transactions around the same date range and for a similar amount. So this is one here. There is a 25-cent difference, so I would need to try to reconcile that, what that 25-cent difference is. That's listed down there. But this is the way that I typically associate all of my transactions with expenses. That way I know I have nothing left. And in case I maybe missed a receipt, then I'm not only going off of the receipts that I have, I'm actually going off of the actual bank details, because we know that the bank transactions don't lie, right? So that's,
let me give you a little advice there, throw this in, Tella. Folks, if you're going to bring a personal card into a system like this, and pretty much all the systems are like this, if you use your personal card a lot to buy a lot of business stuff during the year, that's great. If you only turn in a receipt a month or something off your personal card, don't hook your personal card into the whole system here, because you're going to be excluding 99 out of 100 transactions and only including one. And it kind of becomes a hassle. You're better off just grab a really good receipt off your personal card for what you did, and then add that to the system versus clearing all those ones you had from that personal card. It's just, I've had that experience with multiple systems, and that would be my advice. Now, corporate cards, absolutely completely in there, but just on the personal card, that's going to be your option.
No, thank you for that, Val. And so that kind of wraps up just a quick demonstration of Zoho Expense. I wanted to pass it back over to you to kind of close out the session, as we have a few minutes left.
Yeah, just a couple last quick arguments here, folks. Why are we here? Why should, we obviously think you should choose Zoho Expense. Well, first, the key thing is we're integrated to our own suite. We have a really nice, robust suite. We're only really showing you 3 or 4 apps here in our integrated suite that you are integrated to. That's important, but it's not the most important reason. The most important reason is the next slide. And the next slide has our other integrations. In other words, other applications like QuickBooks, like SAP, like Oracle. We're hooked to a number of other solutions directly. And for today's session, really, that would be QuickBooks. And we're hooked to both desktop and cloud. And you can hook to either one of those. And it's really a great solution for managing expenses. So that was kind of what we wanted to say just in closing. And most importantly today, thank you so much for joining us. And we really hope that you got a lot more out of this than you thought you were coming in. We would really worry that we didn't provide good ideas, guidance, or stories, you name it, in the whole presentation. So thank you. For me, I'll be done and let these other guys close up.
Yeah, like Val said, we do appreciate everyone who attended today's session, and we really hope you learn, a little bit about expenses and expense management and how it can help your business. And I do want to say thank you to Val and Tala for kind of helping out with this presentation. Obviously, Insightful Accountants and Emily for hosting us as well.
And thank you so much. Just want to reiterate, please visit zoho.com/CPA. There you can find more information about our program, the different suite of applications for accountants as well as your clients. And then just going to zoho.com will show you, all the different applications that we have. So that's it from all of us. Thank you, and we'll see you again soon.
Val, Nathan, Tala, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I will get the webinar recording and handout here to you shortly, and I will also give you a Zoho brochure in the follow-up email. Thank you all again so much, and we hope to see you at the next Insightful Accountant webinar. Everyone have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.